Welcome to Perks of Being a Widow. Spoiler, there are none. My name is Avalon, and today I'm doing a little solo episode. And I've changed my mind about 8 times about what this episode's gonna be. So let's see, what did I land on? Oh, healing journey. That's right. Today I'm doing a little solo episode where I'm just gonna talk a bit about my own healing journey and how I got from, bereaved widow to today, where I'm still a widow, but I'm a happy remarried widow. Not that that's like the goal or whatever, but it's where I'm at. So, yeah. I think I mentioned this in my initial telling of my story that, like, one of the things that grief showed me was how poorly I had been living my life. Grief was kind of my biggest teacher and has been a big factor in, I guess, righting the ship, if you will, of like, it's funny that profound grief was the thing that kind of catapulted me into actual healing. I think for a long time, I didn't have healing, I had coping mechanisms. And while they did their job, they kept me, they kept me distracted for a long time there. One of the things that grief showed me was that I was kind of like a nesting doll of trauma. It was like when I finally made the decision to go to therapy, and I think I had noticed this in my initial, because I'd been in therapy for a little bit before I left my corporate job, and I think it became impossible to not see my trauma and to not work on it. It became unbearable. And so, yeah, grief was kind of the thing that put me on the path of like actual healing and actually taking accountability for my bullshit and like actually growing into like growing up, Because I think I had told myself that I grew up young, and and I did. I had to grow up young and fast and like that sort of thing. And when I was a kid, like, I remember everybody being like, you seem so mature and you're so, I got like, you're an old soul. I got that a lot. And like, I always seemed mature for my age and I always seemed older than I was and like, and all of that. But I think for a long time, I used that as an excuse to not actually grow up. I learned, I started doing my own laundry when I was 8. And so and so I never really learned how to do it, right or properly, and like, and it's taken me until I'm now 38, and I'm finally like in a place where I'm like, okay, but like, what if I actually learned to do this the right way instead of the like half-ass way that I taught myself how to do when I was 8. But yeah, so I kind of grief kind of showed me like how deep and prevalent my trauma had become and how my personality had kind of been built almost entirely on coping mechanisms. And as fun as that is, because let me tell you, I'm fun. As fun as that is, I feel like actual healing is the way to go. But so I'm just gonna just tell you a little bit about, how I got from that mess of a human leaving the hospital to where I am today. And I feel like I talked about this a little bit in my story, but let's get into it, shall we? Anyway, 2017, the year that Derek died, I spent most of that drunk or on drugs or hooking up with strangers or, doing everything I could to avoid facing like what I had actually been through. And I made a lot of stupid self-destructive choices. So stupid. And then 2018 became about making up for those choices and facing those choices. I started therapy. I didn't exactly do a making amends tour, like I know that's, in AA and various other recovery programs, I know that that's a big part of, recovery is making amends and like, and it seems like it's not even about how the other person receives it so much as like owning up to your shit. Like that seems like that's more the point, is owning up to your shit. And so I feel like 2018 kind of became the year of owning up to my shit. And that year I also participated in NaNoWriMo, which, if you don't know, is National Novel Writing Month. I think the organization is no longer a thing, but still the month of November is National Novel Writing Month, and the idea is to write a novel in a month, which I believe works out to about 300 pages a day, or like 300 words a day. So like when you break, or like 3 pages a day or something like that. So when you break it down like that, it seems more manageable. But I kind of went into it with absolutely no plan, and it's pretty evident from the writing. But what came out of it was, it ended up being a very healing experience, because it ended up being like just writing about my grief and writing about what it was like to be a widow almost 2 years out, and one of the things that came up a lot was, I realized how much I was still doing that avoidant thing, where it was like, I wasn't focusing on healing. I was like, I was like fretting about some guy that I was, I was into, and I didn't think he was into me, and blah, 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 and like all that stuff that, like, ugh, we spend so much time and energy. Like, I found my high school diary a while ago, and so this diary is between, it starts the summer after my freshman year of high school. And to give you a little context, what was going on in my life, my older sister had just graduated high school, and she joined the Army, and she was leaving for basic. My parents had just bought a new house across the river. I grew up in Wisconsin, or sorry, I grew up in Iowa, and they brought a house across the river in Wisconsin. And so we were moving out of my childhood home, and I was probably going to have to change school districts. I didn't end up having to, that's a whole other story, but so like I was worried about like that, where like my whole life was like kind of in a state of upheaval. And then my mom had kidney stones, and I was kind of I was kind of her caregiver there for a little bit. I mean, and not that she needed like a lot of care, and my mom's pretty independent, but like, she had a stint that she needed, help clean, like she had, there were things that she needed help with. And so like I was my mom's caregiver there for a little bit. And then, like, on top of all of that, my high school boyfriend, who I had been dating for like 3 months, broke up with me over the internet, over MSN Messenger, which, when you're 15 is, kind of a big deal. And it was like, he broke up with me when he had to go to work. So it was like he hopped on MSN Messenger real quick and was like, "Oh, by the way, we're not dating anymore. Okay, bye. I have to go to work." Like, but like, of all those things, because that's a lot of upheaval for a 15-year-old to be going through, but like, of all those things, the thing that I focused on the most in that little diary was the breakup, was the guy, was me obsessing over, why doesn't he want me? Why doesn't he love me? Why doesn't he want to be with me anymore? And, the thing about this novel that I wrote, almost 20 years later, I don't even, yeah, like 20 years later. Whoa, that blew my brain a little bit. But anyway, 20 years later, writing this novel, and of course, what am I obsessing about through most of the novel, through the book, was this guy that I was really into, and like he wasn't into me, and like what is that about? And it's like, come on, girl. Like, and I think a lot of that became, I think that was a way for me to not deal with what I was actually dealing with, It was like, because grief is fucking hard, y'all. It's fucking hard. And it doesn't get easier, It's not, I mean, in some ways it does. You get more accustomed to it, I guess, but like, it's brutal. And so like, I think the experience of writing things out, and like doing that thing where, like, at one point in the novel, and this is actually what happened, I was procrastinating because it's what I do, but like, I opened like, I just moved into this apartment, and like all of my stuff had been in storage, and all of Derek's stuff had been in storage, and I opened a box of his clothes, So I wrote about it, and I wrote about it in third person, like, but it was just this experience of opening this box of clothes, and it still smelled like him, and I hadn't smelled him in almost 2 years at that point, like everything had been in storage for a year and a half. And like that, and I don't think we think about these like steps in grief where it's like, okay, there's yeah, the steps of grief, which I feel like that could be a whole thing. I mean, we talk about like the stages, the 5 stages, which are denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. And we talk about those like they're going to happen in some kind of linear fashion. And the fact is, they don't. They happen like all over the place. And sometimes you feel like you're experiencing new ones. And sometimes you're experiencing like two or three of them at the same time. And it's not linear. It's a mess. It's a whole mess. And there's like no good way to like. There is no good way to grieve. There is no wrong way to grieve. There's no bad. Like, it's just grief. Grief is brutal. Anyway, so that was 2018 was me making amends, taking ownership of the shitty shit I had done, and then, writing this novel that was really just a narration of my life at the time and the steps that and so this apartment that I moved into, like, it was an apartment that was supposed to be ours. Like, a friend of his had bought this building and was renovating it, and the plan was always going to be that Derek and I were going to live in one of the units. And, and then he died, and then, and then his friend was like, well, you can, still live here. So, like, I moved into this apartment, and it was supposed to be our apartment. It was supposed to be like where we were going to start, like, like we had an apartment together, but like this was kind of going to be the and it was something that we were going to plan together, and we were going to pick colors to paint the walls together, and like, and and then I just didn't know how to make it mine at that point, because I didn't, my sense of self had kind of been obliterated there for a little bit. But yeah, so that was 2018. Then 2019, I guess the big bullet points of my grief journey of 2019 is I met someone who I fell in love with. And it was, and there were people that I had, sort of dated in that time, but like, nothing serious. I wasn't emotionally available. But then I met someone, and I remember he had asked me out, and we were meeting up after I had to work, and we were meeting up after my shift. And I remember actually being really excited about meeting up with this guy. And like, and it was the first time that I had really felt like that kind of excitement about like a date. And it's not that like, because there were, I don't think I was capable of feeling excited, for those 2 years there, where I just, I was numb, I was distracted, I was drunk, I was deep in the grief, like, I wasn't in a place to be excited about anybody. And there were great people around me that, in different circumstances, it would have been great to hang out or whatever, but that's not where I was at. So like that was a big, I guess, bullet point in my healing journey, was like realizing that I was ready to love again. I was ready to connect again. I was ready to be excited about, the potential of a romantic relationship again. And I didn't think that I would ever be. I wasn't at like I'm ready for like marriage or anything like that. Like that was, still years away. But, it was a huge step, was this, realizing that I was capable of love again, that, that part of me hadn't died with Derek like I thought maybe it had. Another big bullet point of 2019 is I moved back home to Iowa to help take care of take care take oh gosh, it's coming out. I moved back home to Iowa to help take care of my grandmother. And so like I had been living in Chicago. That's Derek and I met in Chicago. We lived together in Chicago. And so I was leaving I was leaving this place that, had come to mean so much. And I remember it was the summer after he died. I went to a wedding, and I drove a wedding in Vermont. But I drove, And I remember driving back driving back into Chicago and seeing the skyline, and it was the first time that it felt like coming home. And that hurt in certain levels and layers, because like it was, it was the first time it felt like coming home and he wasn't there. 2019, moved home to help take care of my grandmother, but in the process, like, I ended up having to finally get rid of a lot of Derek's stuff. Like, I had had a party. Actually, this was 2019 still. Like, I had had a party at some point, like for his birthday. His birthday in 2019, I had like a bunch of his friends over, and I had like a big box of comics, and I had some action figures, and like, because he had this extensive like comic book collection, and all of these action figures, and like, and they weren't really something that I wanted to hold on to. I didn't know, like, value wise, like, I know I probably could have sold some of those, but like that didn't feel good to me. Like, that didn't feel like something that, that didn't feel good to me. And so I had this party, and I was basically like, whatever you want, guys. Like, these, he would want his friends to have them, first, that you guys get first call, and then after that I'll probably sell or give away or whatever. So like that had been earlier in 2019, and then I moved home, and I had to put stuff in storage, and I only had so much space, and so like it just felt like it was time to downsize on stuff, and like due to like the way that I ended up moving, I didn't have a whole lot of time to make these decisions. So it was kind of like, well, I need to, I don't have the space, and I need to do something. And these are just like, I'm not going to do anything with his clothes. It's, like it's time. So I kept his t-shirts. He had a bunch of like band t-shirts and like ratty old t-shirts that he would like work out in and stuff. And so I kept those. I had a really hard time with his shoes, letting go of his shoes. He had these like motorcycle boots. He didn't have a motorcycle, but I guess that's not the point. But he had these really cool motorcycle boots, and I had no idea what to do with them. I ended up giving them to a friend of his who luckily had the same size feet. But that was hard. It was hard to like, and at that point it had been 2 years, and it was time. But there were some things that I just couldn't let go of. Like, I kept his t-shirts. I still have a couple. And I kept his suit that he wore to our wedding. I actually had the jacket tailored to fit me. I wore that to my for my brother's wedding. But yeah, so I have his suit, and I have, a handful of t-shirts, and that's like what I kept of his like clothes. I still have a couple guitars, pictures. I have his notebooks. I still have some of that stuff, but like I got rid of a lot in a short period of time, and I think I needed to, and that does feel like a step in healing, in the healing journey. And so then, yeah, I was at home, and then it was 2020. And I don't know if you remember, but this little thing happened where we couldn't go outside much, we couldn't go and see people. And honestly, I think that for me personally was kind of a blessing in disguise, because I hadn't been actually dealing with my grief. I had been putting it off. I'd been ignoring it. I've been procrastinating. I've been avoiding, as is my custom. And all my regular sources of distraction were gone, because like my biggest distraction has always been other people, like, and I know it, like I and it's not fair to them, it's not fair to me. So like 2020, I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't hang out with friends. I couldn't just go to the bar and see like who was there. Like, I had to be a lot more intentional about like who I was seeing. I was living with my grandmother who had Alzheimer's, and while that was really like, and that's a different story that I won't share too much here, but while that was a really great experience, like, she wasn't exactly the best conversationalist. She didn't always know who she was. She didn't always know who I was. She didn't always know what was going on. I couldn't exactly talk to her about, like, you know, world events, like what was going on. So it was very lonely, but in a good way, because I think I needed that. It kind of forced me into my own head and body and experience that I don't know I would have chosen on my own. So thank goodness for that, I guess. But so then it was 2020, couldn't go anywhere, and I was like, well, I guess I better get down to the actual healing. I guess it's time. I guess we're gonna do that. And I took a tarot class. I read tarot. I read it professionally now, but at that point, like, I had these, I've had my tarot deck since I was 16, and I would pick them up and I'd put them down, and I'd pick them up and I'd put them down, and like sometimes I'd pull cards for other people and sometimes I wouldn't. I still used the little book that came with it. I didn't know how to actually, like, read, the cards for myself or others. And so I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to do this forever. I've now apparently got all the time in the world. Why the fuck not? So I took this online tarot class. Biddy Tarot, by the way, great company, highly recommend. I got a lot out of it. And so I took this tarot class, and then I bought, a tarot book, and I got more and more into it. And then I was still in therapy. So that's awesome. I started taking yoga. I started doing yoga, which has kind of been probably a lot more profoundly healing than I even am aware of. At this point, I've had an almost daily practice for almost 5 years. Not quite daily, but like at least a couple times a week. And I feel like that's probably been a lot more healing than I'm even aware. There's a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I highly recommend that. I started doing the exercises that she recommends in that book and all of that. So like I worked my way through that. And and that's the thing about healing and like getting through this stuff and like addressing trauma is like at the end of the day it's really not that hard. It's just that you have to keep doing it. You have to show up every day. You have to and you have to do it when you don't want to do it. You have to do it when you do want to do it. You have to do it like it's like running a marathon or climbing a mountain or whatever. Like it's a million small steps that eventually get you to a place where you're balanced and aligned and like all that stuff. But yeah, that was a big part of my healing journey was kind of leaning into these modalities, yoga and journaling and connecting to my creativity and like all of that. And like there's still more, like there's always more. There's always more healing. I think we are all Russian nesting dolls of trauma. Like I don't think that's unique to me. I think I just had the experience of going through profound grief and realizing that I'm a nesting doll of trauma. Anyway, but yeah, so that's 2020. 2021, dated some more, connected some more. We moved my grandmother into a nursing home, and so then I was like in Iowa, and I was like, well, my whole life is ahead of me, so what am I actually supposed to do now? And it was kind of the first time that I was at a place of being like, well, I'm here to live my life. It's not like, it's not something that's happening to me. It's something I have agency in. And so like, what are my choices moving forward? Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? Like, I'm still relatively young. Like, where do I go from here? And I looked into various places. I thought about LA, I thought about New York, I thought about New Orleans, I thought about doing the van life thing, I thought about all of these things. And then I saw a medium, I saw a psychic, and it was such a transformational reading. And it was one of those things that you don't always know what you need to hear until you hear it. And like, one of the things she mentioned was like, the healing aspect of it, because she said like your energy is like really fun and really vibrant, and like it's a lot of like fairies and mermaids and like that kind of energy, but like it's been it has this veil of grief. Like my energy has this veil of grief over it, and that's making it really hard to, connect with things like joy. And, at this point that was 20, let's see, that would have been 2022 is when I got that reading. Yeah, 2022 was pivotal in the way that not a lot happened, but everything happened. So at that point, that would have been 5 years after Derek passed. Through my relationships and such, I realized that I was ready for partnership again. I realized I was ready to consider like that kind of relationship again. I didn't feel like I was necessarily like that I would necessarily find it, because I'm both really romantic and really practical at the same time, where I'm like I didn't, really believe in marriage to begin with, and then I met Derek and I was like, "Oh, apparently I do." Apparently I do believe in that. So like I kind of was coming at it with the same like almost skeptical, like, okay, I'm open to marriage, but like it's not gonna happen, but like I'm open to it. It's not real, it's not gonna happen, but also I'm open to it. So I took off my wedding ring that year, which, is a big step. And it's one of those that there's no right answer, there's no right time, there's no wrong time. It's whenever you feel ready to take off your wedding ring. And so that's what it was for me. Is I was past 5 years, and I was starting to get like, I was in that space of like actually being excited about the idea of partnership again, which, going back to, dating again, which is kind of its whole, like dating as a widow is its own thing. But, it was kind of the first time that I was really excited to consider that as an option. And so like I had this reading, and one of the things she recommended was doing a shamanic healing. And so I had a shamanic healing experience that was really low key pivotal. And I think, I think part of one of the things of grief, and I said this earlier, was like, it is a very harsh mirror for your life. And one of the things that came up was like the deeper healing that needed to happen, where it's not just that my husband died, like there were other things. There are things that predate him that had become such a big part of how I interacted with the world. Like my entire personality was basically one big coping mechanism. And so I really started to dig into some of that deeper healing. And then that's an ongoing journey. That's something I'm probably going to be doing till the day I die, right? Because it's just, there's always more to heal. There's always more to work on. There's always more to dig into. And you know I was thinking about it earlier, and it's like, okay, if your mess is your message, then you can just call me the messenger, because like I've got them all. But that is one thing that really came up in like when I went from just dealing with grief to actually trying to actively heal myself and my trauma and all of that. It flipped a switch, and it changed the timbre of the whole conversation, if you will. So yeah, I had a shamanic healing. I was feeling ready for relationships. Another thing that this psychic had told me was, she had told me that there were 3 places that spirit was showing her that would be good fits for me: Austin, Texas, Vancouver, and Nashville, Tennessee. And all of those were surprises to me, except for Vancouver. Kind of makes sense because I'm basically Canadian, except I'm American. But like I got that Iowa nice thing going for me. Very Canadian like in spirit. I was ready. I was getting ready. I was trying to figure out how to get out of Iowa. I was like, okay, if I start selling stuff and I start looking for an apartment and I can find a job and I can like save up, I can like really buckle down on stuff and like hit my money goal or whatever, you know. So I was like, I was ready to get out, and that that is when I met Luke. And I remember a couple weeks before he and I connected, I had this dream because I was like, you know, I was ready for my person, right? I was like, okay, now I'm ready. So like, where is he? Where are they? Like, he, she, I don't care. They, where are they? They're here somewhere. I know there is someone like out there looking for me, and I'm looking for them, and where are they? And are they not here right now? So I had this dream that was, it was basically my person who was coming in, my future partner, being like, it's okay, babe, like I'm on my way. I just have some stuff that I need to finish up. I gotta finish some stuff up, and I'm gonna be there soon. So like, just hold on. And I was like, okay, fine, all right. And then I ran into, so Luke and I had, you know, it was a small town. We lived in a small town. I walked into the bar that he owned, you know, at the time, which was two doors down from the apartment I was living in. And, you know, and it was, you know, it was a nice interaction. He was cool. You know, we didn't really know each other. We didn't really, you know, we didn't hang out. It was just like a local, like, oh, that guy. You know, if you run into him on the street, you're gonna be like, oh, hey, how's it going? But that's gonna be like the extent of it. But so I had run into him, and I had mentioned that like I was trying, like I don't remember if I had mentioned it or if I had posted on Facebook or something, but I had a bass guitar that Derek had given me that I was considering selling because I was like, well, I gotta get out of here, and I need money to do that. And am I playing this bass guitar? No, but I had a guitar of his that I was selling, and then I was thinking about selling the bass. And he expressed interest in buying it, and then I said something about like, you know, I'm planning on moving to Nashville, and he was like, oh cool, I have a cousin in Nashville, like that's so, and I was like, and he was like, where in Nashville? And I was like, well, East Nashville. And it's like, oh, well, that's crazy. That's where my cousin lives, you know? It was very, like, serendipitous. And then, like, a week or two later, we ran into each other, you know, at a bar, you know, like you do. And then he asked me out after that, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, I hadn't really, I was like, well, I mean, I'm moving, and like, and I want to, like, I'm getting out of here, and like, I'm looking for my person, and I think they might be like in one of these places, and I gotta go. But then I was like, well, I can hang out for, you know, little bit. And you know, just I can hang out, you know, like not I haven't left yet, you know, why not? You know, so he was supposed to be a fling, and then it got serious. It turned out he's my person. It turned out he was, you know, he was able to hold space for Derek and for our relationship. He was going through his own healing journey and experience. Sometimes I wish we had met earlier, that we had had more time together, but you know, we met each other when we were ready for each other, and I think that's huge. And so that relationship, and like honest, and it's not that it hasn't had its challenges, you know, and I'm realizing more and more how much there's you know, there's always more to heal, but you know how healing this relationship has been for me, like not just, you know, one of the things I realized is, and it's not, you know, I guess I've been really lucky in the people that I've been able to be in a relationship with. I've been involved with some really wonderful, amazing people, but I, for whatever reason, which, you know, again, getting into, there's always more to heal. Like relationships had always been like a source of turmoil and pain, and like, you know, and it's not, it was nothing, it wasn't them. It was me, you know. Like I, you know, kind of fed into that drama, you know, like it was me. Like I was I didn't know how to experience love and relationship without also being in pain. I just didn't. And one of the really beautiful things about this relationship in my marriage now is I got to actually enjoy falling in love. You know, it wasn't turmoil. It wasn't It wasn't the does he like me, like oh my god, like is everything, it's solid, and I got to actually enjoy falling in love, and like that was really nice. That was a really nice experience. So yeah, that's kind of been my healing journey. There's more to it. There's always more. But those have been things that have been particularly helpful for me. The book The Body Keeps the Score has actually been really helpful, and I highly recommend it. If you get a chance to read it or listen to it, do it. And it's a kind of a rough read because the first bit is all about trauma and how it affects you on a like cellular level. And when you read the first part, you're like, "Oh, great, I'm just fucked. Great. Awesome. That's wonderful." But then the later part of the book is all about different healing modalities and therapies and the research that backs it up for how it has actually helped people, heal their trauma or work through their trauma or whatever. It includes things like theater, which I could go on a whole thing about how that was my therapy for, I could tell, like, it is not hyperbole to say that theater saved my life, but I digress. It includes yoga and meditation and EMDR and various other healing modalities. And so, like, that was a helpful read. I haven't tried all of those therapies. Yoga has probably been one of the most healing things that I've done for myself, and I don't think I even really realized like how deep that I still don't know how deep that has affected me. I know that it has. Meditation. I feel really great about meditation. Journaling's been really great. Yeah. So that's kind of been my healing journey, sort of start to finish. I mean, it's never finished. Where I'm at now, like, I've got this podcast and I'm feeling really good about it. I'm connecting with a lot of people. Like, I appreciate not just giving, like I do appreciate, like, giving people the space to share their story because I think that's important. And I think that is, I think that's part of how we heal this in our society. You have to talk about it. And it sucks, man. Like living it sucks, talking about it sucks, and we all want to pretend like it's strange or other or different, but it's like but grief is part of life. It is not separate from life. It like the only thing that we are guaranteed in this life is that it's going to end and that everybody else around us is going to experience that same thing, at some point. And so grief is kind of universal, and it's so weird that we don't treat it that way. We treat it like we hold it at arm's length. We treat it with kid gloves. We pretend like it's not important, or valuable or like and honestly, like this is a weird thing to say, but grief saved my life. It fucked my shit up, don't get me wrong, like it was fucking awful, but it also put me on the path to here, to today. It put me on the path to like living the life that I am choosing and not the one that was just kind of like handed to me or expected of me or whatever. It put me on the path to like actually listening to myself and my body. It put me on the path to speaking. Like I am not a big talker. I don't like to talk. Which is so weird that I have a podcast now. How did this happen? But it destroyed me, but it also showed me what needed to be destroyed. It's like I was living in a house with a really shitty foundation, that I had kind of cobbled together and pieced together, and like, was like, oh, this is fine. And then, this lightning strike came in and took out, like, took out a wall. And then I was like, well, fuck, how do I fix this? And then I started doing deeper digging, and realized that, oh, the foundation is fucked. And like, okay, do I want to like keep living in this house, or do I, And it really put me on the path to rebuilding and building better. So in the tarot, the major arcana is often referred to as the Fool's Journey. And so it's this journey through the cards and like all of these big experiences in life that like we might not experience all of them, but they're pretty universal. And my favorite card is the Star. And so the Star is all about rebirth. It's the literal phoenix out of the ashes. It's about rebuilding and rebuilding better and like doing things right, operating from hope and like and what can come out of that. And the Star comes right after the Tower, and the Tower kind of gets a bad rap. It's ruled by Mars. It's the lightning struck tower, and it's basically those events in life that come in and just kind of clear your shit out, right? It's destructive. It feels like it comes out of nowhere. But the thing is, like, it tears that it tears that tower down. But the thing is, like, the foundation wasn't good, right? It doesn't honestly take anything from you that you need to exist. And I think that's what grief is. That's what grief does, is it kind of shows you what you don't need. And it shows you what you thought was working but really isn't working. It shows you what is coping mechanisms versus what is actual healing and actual addressing trauma versus ignoring it. And so, like, yeah, I'm grateful for that. It sucks. I'm not gonna tell you that it doesn't. It fucks your shit up, and it's one of those things, like, it can go either way. It can become and it will go both ways, I think, where it led me into the deepest, darkest parts of myself and showed me the worst parts of myself. And then I had to face that. And then I had to decide to live differently and be different. I had to make that decision. I had to say, I don't like this version of me. I don't like this part of me. I don't want to live like this. Yeah, and that was hard. But it was kind of that or die. So yeah, I think grief is a great teacher. I think it's fucking hard. It's fucking harsh. If you can do it another way, go for it. I'd recommend it, but it is transformative. And you do, and I remember people, because I've kind of become a little bit of a de facto grief counselor for people. Like, I know, like, so I've had a couple different people when they have a friend who's lost a spouse, they're like, "Hey, will you talk to this person?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, absolutely, I will." Like, because it is isolating, and it is one of those things that until you go through it, like, it's impossible to describe exactly what it feels like, because for one, it's different for everybody, but for another, it affects you on such a base level, like a cellular level, that you can't really describe that. But I remember, like, more than one person has asked me, like, how did you get through it? And the short answer is, I don't know. The longer answer is one day at a time. And I guess the longest answer is this podcast episode, where it really was like a years long process. And if I could have done it differently, maybe I would have. Like, if I could have not been an alcoholic mess for a whole year, if I could have done that part differently, then I would have. But I didn't. It's not how I did it. That's so I can't go back and change that. I can't unfuck my life up. I can't take away the hurtful things that I did. I can't, undo those drugs. Like, I can't unsnort that coke. Like, it's not gonna happen. So, and that's, I don't know, is that what I needed at the time? It's what I thought I needed. I can tell you, the benefit of hindsight, like, it didn't help. It just, prolonged the inevitable, which is like actually facing the grief and processing it and dealing with it. And that took me a long time. And it's ongoing. It's still like there are still things that I'm working through and processing. And, and now I have I guess, the benefit of seeing, the benefit of being aware of my other trauma. So I've got plenty of trauma to work through. Like, it's fine. I got it. But yeah, so I mean, that this is the longer answer, is like, I hit my rock bottom. I started therapy. I did my amends or whatever. I took ownership of my shit, and then I started, doing the actual work of, healing, of working through the trauma, of recognizing my shitty patterns and how they affect people and how they affect me, and figuring out like what feels in alignment for me, what feels good, what feels safe, what does safe mean? Like, actually asking these questions and not taking it for granted that I already know, because I don't, right? Like, one of the things I'm working through right now, my relationship to money, and how that has been, like, I don't have a good relationship with money, and that's, something that I need to address, because at the end of the day, money is neutral, right? Like, it's not, it doesn't, it is, it's not good, it's not bad, it's there, it's a tool, it's, it's something that we all have agreed to be a part of our society, that we're like, blah, 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 blah. And so, like, that's a thing that I need to work through and figure out, like, because you can't both hope to manifest and call in money while you're like looking down your nose at it. And that's the problem that I've been running into, is like, and that's a pretty deep wound from childhood, and so, like, there's always going to be more to work on, and I guess I now have the benefit of seeing that. But so yeah, the longer answer, there are steps in the grieving process, in the moving forward process, in the journey. But at the end of the day, it kind of depends what mountain you're on, right? Like, not everybody's gonna hit, like, not everybody's gonna have an alcoholic, drug induced rock bottom, right? Not everyone's gonna go through that experience. Not everyone's gonna make the same shitty choices that I made and then have to crawl their way out of it. That is not gonna be everybody's journey, but it might be. Not everybody's journey is gonna include, living with your grandmother for 2 years, like, it might be. And, you take what you can. Like, not everybody's journey is going to include tarot or yoga or EMDR or any of those. Like, some people are going to experience it through God. Like, some people are going to turn to the Bible. Some people are going to turn to community. Some people are going to turn to art. Some people are going to turn to nature. And it really doesn't matter what you turn to, so long as it's feeds you, as long as you're getting out of it what you need to be, as long as it's nourishing. Like, there's a certain amount of nourishing that you get from things like yoga, from like eating well, from doing these therapies that, there's scientific data behind. But like, also, like, you can find, like, dance therapy, like, is a great one. Like, I was at a retreat last year, and we had, it was called Dance Church. And I didn't realize, like, how much, like, and you hear about people, you store stress in your hips, but it didn't occur to me to fucking shake my hips for an hour, like, and how healing that could be. Like, dancing is therapeutic. And so, like, the really abridged answer to anybody's healing journey is one step at a time. Like, there's a phrase that I repeated to people close to me, especially in that first year, was, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's how you get through it, is you keep going, you keep showing up. And like, yeah, there's going to be hard days. There's going to be days where you want it all to end. There's going to be days where it hurts too much and you need some sort of relief, and you need to leave, and you need to get out. Like, I was packing up our apartment, and we had gotten these really beautiful champagne flutes as gifts for our wedding, and I was packing stuff up, and I was cleaning, and I like pulled down a glass or something, and one of those champagne flutes fell and shattered. And this was, I think, 2 months, not even, like a month and a half. Like, I was still carrying around the bottle of ashes at this point, but it shattered, and I only had one left, and it hurt so bad to look at this one. Like, it was such a metaphor for our relation, for my life. Was like, I had this marriage and this beautiful thing, and now he's gone. It's gone, and You know, I left and I went to the bar and I took a bunch of shots and like, is that the way to deal with it? I don't know. That's how I dealt with it. At the time, it felt like it was too much and I couldn't handle it. And so I left. And there are going to be days like that. But then there's also going to be days where your new husband is holding you while you cry on your wedding anniversary, you know? Like there's going to be days where you're going to have this new connection. There's going to be days where you connect with another widow and they get to share their story and you get to share your story and you get to connect on this level and this understanding that like honestly not everybody has. And so yeah, it fucking sucks. You know, there's no getting around it. It fucking sucks. But there are good things that you can get out of it, and there are beautiful moments along the way, and there is still space for joy and love and moving forward. And so like I guess yeah, it's just showing up every day. Like that's how you get through it. That's how you heal. That's how you know, that's how you get through this shit. One bite at a time. So, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you would like to be on the podcast, please email me at avalon@perksofbeingawidow.com or you can reach out to me on Instagram at perksofbeingawidow. Thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this.